corporate jet was a tomb, and Evelyn Reed was its sole, silent occupant. Outside, the tarmac shimmered under a brutal, uncaring sun. Inside, the air was frigid, sterile, and smelled of recycled failure. The phone in her hand was still warm, but the words that had just come through it were ice cold. The board voted unanimously, Evelyn. Effective immediately. We're sorry. Jarvis is taking over as interim CEO. Jarvis, her protege, the man whose ambition she had nurtured, whose career she had built with her own 2 hands. The man who had just orchestrated a flawless, bloodless coup, presenting a dossier of strategic missteps that were, in truth, her calculated risks, the very risks that had built the empire from which he was now evicting her. 23 years. She had poured every ounce of herself into building Ethereum, a tech giant that was her life, her identity, her only child. She had sacrificed relationships, postponed motherhood, traded sleep for strategy sessions. And in one 15-minute conference call, it was all gone. Not with a bang, but with a boardroom-approved whimper. A sound escaped her lips, a raw, choked thing that was half sob, half laugh. She was 51 years old. The market would label her obsolete. A has-been. The thought was a physical blow to her sternum, stealing her breath. She was no longer Evelyn Reed, CEO. She was nothing. A hollowed-out shell in a $5,000 Valentino suit, sitting alone on a leather seat, hurtling toward a home that was just an empty, echoing penthouse. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, a cheerful intrusion into her apocalypse. Ms. Reed, we've landed. Welcome to Cedar Springs. Cedar Springs, a nowhere town for a refueling stop. A perfect metaphor for her interrupted, ruined journey. She stumbled down the steps, the heat a suffocating blanket. Her assistant had arranged for a car. It wasn't here. Of course it wasn't. The first of a million small failures that would now define her existence. She scanned the small, dusty private airfield, her vision blurring with a fresh wave of hot, angry tears. Her phone was dead. The world, it seemed, had simply unplugged her. That's when she saw it. The only sign of life in this godforsaken place. A small, weathered garage bay with the words Elijah's Auto and Angelic Detailing painted in fading blue letters. And standing beside a rusting tow truck was a man in oil-stained coveralls, his skin the rich, deep brown of mahogany. He was wiping his hands on a rag, watching her with a calm, patient expression. Evelyn Reed, former titan of industry, straightened her shoulders, wiped her cheeks with a furious hand, and marched toward him, her heels clicking a staccato of pure, undiluted rage on the sun-baked asphalt. My car was supposed to be here. It's not. Her voice was a whip crack, honed by decades of command, meant to intimidate and assign blame. The man didn't flinch. He finished wiping his hands, his movements slow and deliberate. Afternoon, ma'am. Didn't get a call about any car service today. Name's Elijah. What seems to be the trouble? The trouble, she spat, is that I am stranded in this ditch, and my multi-billion-dollar company is being stolen from me while I'm here. The irrationality of the statement didn't even register. Her pain was a torrent, and he was the nearest drain. A flicker of something, not pity, but understanding, passed through his eyes. Sorry to hear that, ma'am. That's a heavy burden. But we can't do much about it standing in this heat. Your phone dead. Yes, it's dead. Everything is dead, she nearly shouted, the hysteria bubbling up again. All right now, he said, his voice a low, steady rumble, like distant thunder. It wasn't loud, but it held an authority that had nothing to do with corporate titles. No need for all that. The world ain't ended. Come on inside. I've got a charger and a cold sweet tea that'll help you think clearer. He turned and walked toward the open garage bay, not waiting to see if she followed. Evelyn stood rooted to the spot, stunned by his casual dismissal of her crisis. Come inside. Into that grimy, greasy hole. She'd rather melt on the tarmac. But the sun was relentless, and her throat was parched. With a sound of utter disgust, she followed him, stepping over tools and around stacks of tires, her designer heels sticking to the oil-stained concrete. He gestured to a worn office chair beside a cluttered desk. A small fan oscillated nearby, offering a blessedly cool breeze. He plugged in her phone and handed her a tall, condensation-covered glass of iced tea from a small fridge. The tea was sweet, too sweet for her usual palate, but it was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. She drank it greedily, the sugar hitting her system, momentarily steadying her shaking hands. She watched him as he went back to work on an engine block, his movements efficient, knowledgeable. There was a quiet dignity to his work, a mastery she recognized but had never associated with manual labor. "So they took your company," he said, not looking up from the carburetor he was cleaning. "They betrayed me," she corrected, her voice quieter now, the fight leaching out of her, replaced by a weary ache. Happens. Sometimes the very hands you feed are the ones that bite you." He looked up, his gaze direct. "But a thing given can't be stolen, can it? They can take the title, but they can't take what you built. That's still yours. Right here." He tapped a greasy finger against his temple, then over his heart. Evelyn stared at him. It was a preposterous simplification. Naive. "You don't understand. It was my life." "No, ma'am," he said gently, but with a firmness that brooked no argument. "It was your job. A mighty big one, sure. But if it was your whole life, what you gonna do now? Just stop living?" The question hung in the air, thick with the smell of gasoline and truth. She had no answer. The silence was broken by the sound of children's laughter. A boy and a girl, around 8 and 10, came running into the garage. "Papa, Papa, we aced our math tests," the little girl yelled, waving a paper. Elijah's face transformed, the calm solemnity breaking into a radiant, joyful smile that reached the corners of his eyes. He scooped them both up in a hug, not caring about the grease on his coveralls. "That's my brilliant babies. Go show Miss Deborah next door. I'm proud of you." They giggled and ran off, their energy a stark contrast to the heavy stillness inside Evelyn. She watched the scene, a strange, foreign ache in her chest. It wasn't envy. It was recognition. This man, in his dusty garage, surrounded by what she would have once deemed failure, was richer than she had ever been. His life was built on something unshakable, something that no board vote could ever take away. Her phone buzzed to life on the desk, screen flooding with frantic notifications and calls from Jarvis, from the board, from reporters. The world was screaming for her attention again. She looked from the buzzing screen to Elijah, who was now humming softly as he worked, the joy of his grandchildren still lighting his face. For the first time in 23 years, Evelyn Reed ignored the call. She just sat there, in the quiet, greasy sanctuary of the garage, and let the cracks in her polished armor widen, until the lonely, terrified woman inside could finally begin to breathe. An hour passed. The fan word. Tools clinked. Evelyn's phone eventually went dark again, its battery drained once more, and she felt a perverse sense of relief. The silence it left behind was not empty. It was full of the sounds of honest work and the lingering echo of children's laughter. She watched Elijah. There was a rhythm to his labor, a focused grace as he diagnosed a problem, selected a tool, and applied just the right amount of pressure. He wasn't fighting the engine. He was listening to it, understanding its language of knocks and sputters. It was a dialogue of respect. "How?" The word was out of her mouth before she could stop it, raspy and small. Elijah paused, looking over at her. "How what, ma'am? How are you not angry?" she elaborated, gesturing vaguely at the humble garage, the small town beyond. "How are you so content?" He leaned against the workbench, considering her question as if it were a complex mechanical issue. "Anger's like a faulty fuel line," he said after a moment. "It'll pump and pump, hot and destructive, until it burns up the whole engine if you let it. It don't fix a thing. It just destroys what's left." He picked up a wrench, turning it over in his hands. "I had my share of reasons to be angry. Lord knows. But I chose to be a mechanic instead." "A mechanic?" she asked, confused. "Yeah, of souls, in a way. Mine first. You see, you can't control what other folks do. The betrayals, the hurts, the losses. That's life's weather. But you can control your own tools. You got kindness. You got forgiveness, for yourself and others. You got patience. You got love. Those are your wrenches and your ratchets. You use them on your own heart first. Tighten up what's loose. Mend what's broken. Then, if you're lucky, you get to use them to help somebody else." He nodded toward her. Like now. Evelyn felt a sob well up in her throat, but this one was different. It wasn't born of self-pity or rage. It was the sound of a dam breaking, of a truth so profound and simple finally finding its way through a lifetime of armor and ambition. Tears streamed down her face, clean and silent this time. She didn't wipe them away. She let them fall, feeling them trace paths through the carefully applied makeup that was the mask of Evelyn Reed, CEO. "I don't know who I am without it," she whispered, the confession terrifying and liberating. "Then I expect that's the real work right there," Elijah said softly. "Not building a company, building a woman." He gave her space then, returning to his engine. Evelyn sat in the old chair, and for the first time since she was a hungry, scrappy young woman with a business plan, she did nothing. She didn't strategize. She didn't problem solve. She just was. She felt the ache of her loss, not as a catastrophic failure, but as a deep, painful wound that needed to be acknowledged before it could heal. Later, a tow truck arrived with a luxury sedan with a flat tire. The flustered driver, seeing Evelyn, began apologizing profusely for the delay. Elijah simply waved him off. "No trouble. We were having us a good talk." As Elijah efficiently changed the tire, the driver looked at Evelyn's tear-streaked face and expensive suit with curiosity, but said nothing. When the job was done, Elijah refused payment from the driver. "Company credit," he said with a wink. The driver left, and Evelyn stood. She felt unsteady, but clearer. The world hadn't changed, but her position in it had shifted seismically. "I need to get to the city," she said. "I figured," Elijah replied. "Cars already." She reached for her platinum card, but he shook his head. "The tea and the conversation are on the house." "I can't possibly." "Ma'am," he interrupted, his voice kind but firm. "Some things ain't for sale. Their value is in the giving." She nodded, the lesson settling deep within her. She had nothing to offer him that he needed. No power, no influence, no money. And for the first time, that felt okay. More than okay. It felt honest. "Thank you, Elijah," she said, and the words carried the weight of a gratitude far beyond a charged phone and a cold drink. "You take care of yourself, Evelyn Reed," he said. He'd never asked her name. He'd just known. "Remember your tools." She slid into the driver's seat of the sedan. As she pulled onto the road, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Elijah stood there, a solid, steady figure in front of his humble garage, waving once before turning back to his work. She drove toward the city, toward the battle for her company, but she was no longer the same woman who had landed there. The hollowness was still there, but it was no longer an emptiness. It was space. Space to grieve. Space to breathe. Space to, for the first time, build a life instead of just a legacy. She wouldn't get her company back. She knew that already. But as the skyline emerged on the horizon, she didn't see a fortress she had lost. She saw a city full of people, full of stories, full of potential for a different kind of connection. She had arrived at the airfield as a CEO and left as a student. She had been broken down on the side of the road of her own life, and a mechanic with the tools of kindness and strength had shown her not just how to start the engine again, but that she was, and always had been, the driver. The healing was just beginning, but for the first time in a long, long time, Evelyn Reed was finally headed in the right direction. Moral of the story: true strength is not found in titles or impervious armor, but in the courage to be vulnerable, the humility to accept kindness, and the wisdom to use the tools of compassion to mend your own soul. The most profound healing often begins not in the boardroom, but in the quiet garage of a stranger who reminds you that your value was never in what you built, but in who you are.